We are so glad that you have joined us today. My name is Jeff Fail, and I am one of the ministry apprentices here. If this is your first time here, or maybe your first time to church, welcome. And what a hard day to come to church. How about that text, eh? When I first saw the sermon topic, I thought, I can't wait to see how Tyler or Nathan tackle this sermon. And then I checked my email. I thought you were supposed to take it easy on the apprentices. Well, here at St. George, we look at the hard stuff. And this evening, that's exactly what we're going to do together. The story this evening, it may be hard, but here's the point, and it's good news. We have a responsibility to each other here and now, and how we respond will impact our future. We are currently in a series in the Gospel of Luke, and just to quickly catch you up, Luke the doctor has written a historical account of eyewitnesses recording the stories, the miracles, and the message of Jesus Christ. So let's set up the scene. Jesus is teaching his disciples and a local crowd the importance of personal responsibility when it comes to finances and resources. The fancy biblical term is stewardship. And Jesus says how you steward or handle your money, it reflects God's vision of a healthy community. And in turn, it positively impacts everyone around you. A group of religious leaders called the Pharisees, who are by and large God-fearing men, they step forward and they begin to criticize Jesus. They're uncomfortable with his message. As you read through the Gospels, you'll find certain religious groups will challenge Jesus, and then in turn, Jesus will respond in care, but he'll provide correction. The Pharisees, they're an important religious group, and they have a responsibility to protect the Jewish people. They uphold the law, and basically what the responsibility is they hold up God's plan for maximizing happiness and minimizing pain, to put it simply, as we heard Bishop Jenny preach last week. And Jesus' frustration with them is that instead of using the law to protect the people, they use the law to enrich themselves. This is where we find ourselves this evening. Our reading captures Jesus' response to the Pharisees. So let me give you a quick breakdown. Jesus tells a story of two men, a rich man who lives a life of luxury, and Lazarus, a poor man with a skin condition that leaves him unable to work and in severe pain. The two men are neighbors, with the rich man living in his gated home and Lazarus sleeping rough just outside of the gate. Both men die rather suddenly, and Lazarus is rushed to the side of Father Abraham, the patriarch of the Jewish people, presumably in paradise or heaven. And the rich man, in contrast, he dies and he's buried, and when he wakes up in Hades. And the rich man, in burning pain, he calls out to Father Abraham, asking for Lazarus to bring him a drop of water for a moment of release. And Abraham says, I can't. There's a great chasm between us. The rich man then begs Abraham, well, send Lazarus and send him from the dead to tell my brothers so that they don't end up here. And Abraham tells them that they have Moses and the prophets. And even if someone were to rise from the dead, well, they wouldn't be convinced. This story is hard tonight. But I promise you there's some real good news in here. But good news does not always mean easy to hear news. Let's be clear, though, before we get into it, what this parable isn't. While there is certainly a financial aspect to this story, it's not strictly a rich versus poor lesson. It's much deeper than that. We'll explore that tonight. And while Jesus does provide imagery of the afterlife, this is not a comprehensive narrative on how the afterlife works. Jesus is using popular ideas about the afterlife to tell a story that gets to his main point. And some of you are looking at me tonight and you're looking a little sad. So let me give you a good news side note. Who needs a good news side note? Give me some hands. All right, good news side note. There is an afterlife. And you get to choose, you get to have a choice in the matter. We can choose to be fully in the presence of God, or we can continue to live separate from God. And when we die, we will go to a place where God has removed his presence. And it's hellish. Today, I want to look at three characters, and I want to see how they respond in this story. Our three characters are the rich man, Lazarus, and the rich man's 5 brothers. So who is the rich man? Jesus is clearly speaking to the Pharisees, as I mentioned before, who are highly respected leaders in their community. They have that responsibility to uphold the law, to teach the people and lead them according to God's word. And it's for the good of the people. The laws were put in place to protect the people, to provide a structure of care and a system of flourishing. And all of this so that the people could live with and near God. So why then is Jesus giving them such a hard time? You know, it sounds to me, when I first read this, it sounds like Jesus is saying, you guys are having a good time now, but just wait. You're going to die. And, oh, by the way, when you wake up, it's going to be pretty hot. No, Jesus isn't saying, he's not saying that. He's using this as a challenge to the Pharisees, and he's challenging them because they've been using the law to gain wealth, to enrich themselves at the expense of the people. This is serious for Jesus. In Luke, he records that the Pharisees were lovers of money. And Jesus says in Matthew 6:24 that no one can serve 2 masters. You cannot serve God and wealth. And some of the Pharisees, not all of them, but some of the Pharisees, just as this rich man, had devoted their life to the pursuit of wealth at the expense of their community. Father Jerome, a 4th century priest in the church, he said that the rich man's sin is a sin of omission, a lack of action. And the Pharisees, they would have known the Old Testament passage in Leviticus 19:18, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Lazarus was literally the rich man's neighbor. And instead of choosing to see his neighbor and to love him as lavishly as he loved himself, Lazarus remained in his state of distress until his death. The rich man chose himself over his responsibility as son of Abraham. He ignored the law that was put into place to protect Lazarus. And God did not forget. Well, who is Lazarus? The name Lazarus was a common name in 1st century Palestine, and it's most likely not the same Lazarus who Jesus would raise from the dead. The man is named Lazarus in the story most likely because of his name. His name means God helps. This is important, and we'll get back to it briefly. What we know about Lazarus's condition it's quite concerning. He's a poor man, covered in sores, some kind of skin condition that prevents him from being able to contribute to society. And not only this, but he's unclean according to Jewish law, 1st century Jewish law. So this means that he wasn't able to go to the temple, which means that he was removed from the presence of God. His only option is to sit in a public space and to beg for food. The only comfort that he has is when unclean street dogs come and lick his wounds. It's his only relief. And it's interesting that nature cared for Lazarus even when society did not. We don't know much more about Lazarus, other than that he's an Israelite, therefore a child of Abraham, the same as the rich man. And the greatest desire for Lazarus would be to eat the scraps of leftovers from the rich man's table, but it doesn't appear that he even gets that. His difficult and painful experience ends in death. But this is where the story shifts. The man who was banned from the presence of God, not allowed to enter the temple, and ignored by his neighbors, is immediately rushed into the presence of God. He's rushed to the side of Abraham, meaning the community of heaven where God resides. In life, the law that was put into place by Moses that was meant to protect folks like Lazarus failed him. The law didn't work because the rich man did not obey the law. Remember that Lazarus' name means God helps? Well, God had sent someone to help Lazarus. It was the rich man. The rich man failed to be the help of God, but God did not forget Lazarus. As Bishop Jenny said last week, God has designed the world in a partnership model. This is built into the fabric of creation. So who's the rich man's five brothers? Well, the rich man's five brothers, they go unnamed in our story, but we can suppose that they're living very similar lives to their brother. This is indicated in the rich man's fear for them, and it's why he asks Abraham to warn them. Abraham's response is that, well, they have everything that they need to make the right decision. They have the law, they have Moses, they have the prophets. Remember that whole love your neighbor thing? The rich man says, well, the law is not enough. It's just so easy to ignore it after all. What if somebody comes back to life from the dead, though? Jesus is foreshadowing his own death and resurrection here. And Abraham replies, they won't believe even if someone is raised from the dead. I hear this, St. George, I hear this with such sadness in the voice of Jesus. Jesus, throughout his teaching, tells that all of the law and all of the prophets are summed up in two things. Love the Lord your God with all you got, and love your neighbor as yourself. This is the message of God. This is what the law is about, that in order for all people to flourish, we must see ourselves within the context of our community. Jesus, who would die and be raised to life, has still been ignored throughout history by so many who hear but do not listen. The five brothers, they had everything that they needed, but even still, they would not listen. So what then is the impact, and why should I care? Well, one of the important lessons that we have heard here at St. George these past few weeks in this series, is that we need to not be quick to let ourselves off the hook. There's a temptation to position ourselves as the good character. You know, we want the side of Abraham, the heavenly reward of Lazarus, but we want the rich man's wealth. There's no character in here that fits the bill. But remember, the world isn't divided into good and bad people. The world is divided into lost and found people. In this message from Jesus, we can see ourselves in these three characters. And by taking on their lenses, we can be more faithful to the church, to Christ, to his body, the church, and in turn be better caretakers for our world. St. George, I am the rich man. I am often focused on prioritizing myself at the expense of others. Do I see myself as God's help? If I'm honest, no. I often view my work, my education, my needs as the highest priority. And those around me can get the crumbs if they're lucky. Jesus has a warning to me this evening. He says, when I die, and I will die, what I chose in this life, it has an impact on what I'll have chosen for myself in the next chapter of existence. This isn't a threat, but this is an encouragement. This is an encouragement to stop prioritizing myself at the expense of others. Because what I do in this life, it actually matters. I mean, would you want it any other way? What you do in this life, it matters. I'm also Lazarus. I've experienced pain and difficulties in my life. Well, not as extreme as Lazarus. I grew up with severe migraines as a child. I would lay on the floor in our bathroom. We had a tiled floor, and I would lay on the cool tile praying for relief, and relief seldom came. Many times in my life, I've cried out to God for help, and while sometimes He came to my aid, other times it felt as though my prayers were falling on deaf ears. I have felt removed or unable to experience the presence of God. And Jesus' encouragement to me this evening is that He not only sees my pain, but He is actively working to send people into my life to be help. And when I die, my pain will be healed for good. And I will one day be completely and totally in the presence of God, and I will feel His nearness. My suffering is not forever. I am the rich man's 5 brothers. How many times have I doubted God? I've often prayed, God, I need more evidence of your existence. I've often prayed, God, if you don't do a miracle, then I won't believe, only to see the miracle of another day and still have doubt. I often ask God for more. I need more. Jesus' encouragement to me this evening is that I have enough. I have the ark of God working through the Old Testament. I have heard the good news of the Gospels. I have the church all around this room and throughout history. I have everything that I need to make a choice to believe. Well, friends, you are the rich man. You are Lazarus. You are the rich man's 5 brothers. Maybe not all 3 today, but I'm sure that from time to time you have seen life through these eyes. And Jesus' message to you and to me this evening is so honest and encouraging. One, what we do in this life, it actually matters. This is so very good news. Our lives and our time are not wastes as we sit around waiting for eternity. We get to be involved in God's good work right now. This is how God designed it. 2, God helps, and you are who He has chosen to help. Love your neighbor. Who's your neighbor, you might ask? Well, I'm so glad that you asked, St. George. Jesus clarifies this in the story of the Good Samaritan. And spoiler alert, if you haven't read it, it's only 2,000 years old. So if you haven't read it yet, spoiler alert, your neighbor is everyone, and it's especially the one that you don't like. Don't look around the room, just look at your shoes. And 3, lastly in 3, if you are suffering and in pain, whether it's cancer, a bad relationship, a job loss, loneliness, or maybe you feel removed from the presence of God. Jesus sees you. You are not forgotten. Look around this room. We are here to be God's help to each other. Join a community group. Join the servers. Get on the worship team. This is the place for you. After Eucharist, we're going to have a time of prayer. I would encourage you, in whatever state that you're in this evening, whether you're the rich man Lazarus or the 5 brothers, I would encourage you to meet with one of our trained and trusted prayer leader groups. They'll be usually in the back of the room. This is the place for you to pray. Here are 4 quick things to seek prayer for. 1, that God would open your eyes to see those who are suffering around you. 2, that God would help you with your choices. 3, that God would heal you of your pain. And 4, that you would feel the nearness of God. And afterwards, as you go out these doors into our city, ask yourself, how can I be God's help to Toronto? God, give us the grace to do the hard things. Amen.